All right, welcome back, campers. It is Obi-Wan here, and I do apologize for the delay in getting this video out. You know, sometimes Darth real life hits, and we had to get rid of our RV. Well, we sort of paid it off, and it had been sitting for 2 years, and we finally got rid of it, got it sold, so that project is done and gone. And I'm very happy with that. And in the meantime, we did finish printing both halves of this, not to mention, just as a side note for the future, I got some really cool stuff coming out on Kaz Rider blasters. But talking about the Mando Mercs gauntlets. And so I've got these prints, and my intention is one of these I'm going to process and post-process in one way, and the other one I'm going to post-process in a different way. And I'm just going to take a look and see what is faster, what helps get rid of the VPLs or the visible print lines quicker. And really, you know, I'm trying just to cut down on that post-processing time. So on this one, I'm going to do something that I've done in the past, which is take a razor blade, like a utility knife blade, and just scratch across the top of it, getting rid of those high points, and doing that first before I lay down ye old filler primer or before I do any sanding. So that's what I'm going to be doing on this one. Then on this one, purely for grins and giggles sake, I am going to take this here Anycubic UV Cure resin. I'm going to put it on the exterior of this, a lot like doing XTC 3D, but I'm going to put that on here and then see about sanding that down and getting rid of the VPLs this way. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. Okay, so here we are. That was right at 10 minutes of scraping. And compared to what it was, it's considerably better. I will say this much, it is a little rough on the hands. You get a little hand crampage and whatnot. But as you can see by the mess on the table, I did get rid of a whole lot of the high points, and is certainly less scrapey than what it was. I still need to do some detail work in a couple of areas. This area here, I might hit actually with a sanding stick. So that is just its own separate detail point. Those are always hard to get. But all in all, that didn't do too bad for 10 minutes worth of work. All right, so on this part, I am going to use my Anycubic 3D printed UV curing resin. I'm gonna put some of that into a little cup, and I'm gonna brush it on. And I have two ways of curing this. One is a handy dandy UV flashlight, and the other is a Anycubic wash and cure station. And so once I get a base level of curing done on this with a flashlight, I'm going to pop it into the curing station. So let's go. Okay, so here we are. 2 minutes in the Anycubic wash and cure station. Obviously there's going to be stuff to sand down, but I'll tell you what, you hear that? You don't really hear that raised edge quite as much as what you did. So could I or should I have done a little bit more effort to sand it down? Yeah, quite likely. But this was a good experiment. It's still feeling a little bit tacky, so I'm going to toss it back in for a couple minutes. And I'm going to end up using the rest of that resin that I poured out on another blaster. So here we are. Gauntlet thrown into the cure station. I did 6 minutes on this just to give it a really good solid bake. Can't hurt it. And you know, it's I gotta say it's interesting. I might even bake it a little bit more, you know, in the UV. Might toss another layer onto it. You know, obviously I got some bubbles and I could do better with a sponge or with the chip brush. And you do have to be careful about it pooling on too much. So there will be areas that I do have to sand down more. But as far as a fill-in, it is absolutely a viable option. You do have to be careful really about the pooling and just too much drip. And so, you know, that could just be a factor of taking your time. We'll just see how this goes. But there are two completely different ways of trying to get rid of the worst part of the visible print lines. So kind of fun, not too bad for a few, you know, half an hour's worth of work. All right, so here we are with a couple of coats on it, and it is really feeling good, considerably smoother. And I'll say this much, compared to using XTC 3D, this is an absolute cakewalk. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm probably gonna give it a light sanding, maybe a 120 or so, and then just toss on a light coat of filler primer just to see what this is looking like and show off what's on there. Because it's kind of hard to tell with all the shine. But I'll tell you what, for just a tiny bit of work, almost no work and effort put into it, that's pretty spiffy. The other nice thing is this is really feeling more solid, more rigid compared to a straight up 3D print. So it's been a fun experiment so far. Okay, so where we're at now is I just did 6 minutes of sanding on both halves. This half just straight up 150, and the one on the right I did with 150 plus the sanding sponge, the rough sanding sponge. So my son, who just walked in from school and has no idea whatsoever of what he just walked into, what I want you to do is just rub your fingernail along one versus the other and let me know your rough thoughts on which one feels smoother.
This one's infinitely more smooth.
Okay.
Could be the print part of it, partly because of the print quality, because there is a strip running down here that is noticeably more rough.
Okay.
However, this is through and through 5 times more rough than this.
Okay. And so what we have here on the left is simply what I scraped off with the flat of the blade. The one on the right is what I hit with the UV Cure resin. Baked it for about 6 minutes twice in the wash and cure machine, and 6 minutes or so of sanding. So I think at least right now, on first guess, the resin is doing better. We're gonna clean this up, give it a very light coat of primer before we go to bed, and we'll see what they look like. Okay, so here we are, just a very light dusting of filler primer. And you can obviously see on the one that I just scraped how there are still trenches and divots and massive amounts of stuff that have to be filled in. Whereas when I go over to this side that I had used the resin, it is infinitely cleaner. Now, both of these absolutely need a whole lot more work to do, but I'll tell you what, the resin first sure makes sense to me.